Sometimes it seems like the only way we can get a new view of life is when the old ways are completely collapsing. I experienced this personally, as I've discussed on this channel before. I made such a spectacular mess of my life. So many unwise, foolish, misguided, and ultimately criminal choices that it was kind of ruthlessly and ultimately graciously revealed to me that everything that I had believed about myself was at best only partly true, and at worst an outright lie or illusion. And that's not an easy process to go through, but it can be incredibly liberating. And what I want to talk about today is, doesn't this kind of seem like what's happening in the world around us these days? So many things about our lives, the economic system, the political system, the educational system, any system you can imagine, kind of seemed like it was working, at least to some degree. It wasn't working for everybody, but there was a kind of level of functioning that we took for granted and counted upon. And at least to me, it looks like these days that's falling down around us in just about every way that I can see. And this causes all kinds of reactivity. It causes terror and anxiety and anger and frustration and sadness for everything that's being lost. And it can be incredibly chaotic and a time of great upheaval and upset and trauma and drama for all of us. And so from my own experience, what I'm suggesting here is that as a culture, we take on a potentially new way of meeting what's happening in the world around us. A new vision, a new understanding of what's happening in our world and how we can meet that. And I want to say I'm not talking about a new political party or new anything structural. I'm talking about a simple way that we can meet what is happening in our world as it affects us individually and as it affects everyone around us and the collective. And what I'm suggesting as a new vision for our culture is this notion of compassionate accountability. Personally, when I was going through the implosion of my own life, the collapse of my own life, in order to survive that, I had to develop and find a kind of compassion for myself, an understanding that as stupid and hurtful and criminal as the things that I did ultimately turned out to be, there were reasons why I did them. And that to get to the root of compassion for myself and understanding what had happened and why I fell for the foolishness I fell for and why I carried it out in the ways that I did. Slowly and gradually over time, I was able to find a kind of compassion for myself, even in the tremendous foolishness and harmfulness of what I did. And so that's the first thing that I'm suggesting that we bring to our situation as a culture, as a collective. It's tremendous compassion for each one of us individually, for all of us collectively, for the silly and insane and hurtful and vicious and harmful things that we do to ourselves and to each other, to find the place of meeting ourselves and each other with compassion. There's so much more opportunity for compassion than, at least in my limited understanding of history, there ever has been. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day, and she was showing me pictures of her parents and what life was like for them growing up. And we both just realized that as hard as they were on my friend and as much hardship as they created in her life, they had very little chance to do anything differently. There were no support groups. There was no counseling. There was very, very little, even honest conversations among family members about the hard things that happened to us. And for all the chaos that we have, and for all the trauma and drama and pain and hardship that's happening, there's a lot that's known about what's happened to us. There's a lot of ways that we can understand, excuse me, and bring compassion to ourselves and each other. When I was growing up, nobody talked about sexual trauma. Nobody talked about family abuse. This was all hidden behind closed doors and not talked about. So many things now with people like Gabor Mate and talking about trauma, and so many understandings, so much understanding of how these things affect us, that there's a real opportunity, even in the midst of all the chaos around us, to bring great compassion to ourselves and to each other for what we're experiencing in this apparently collapsing culture. So that's the first and probably most important element of this new vision that I'm suggesting, that instead of blaming ourselves, instead of blaming each other, and if that happens, it happens, and that can be processed and that can be let go over time. But instead of resorting to this as our default mechanism, it's my fault, if it's not my fault, it's your fault, and this kind of reactivity, we can just deepen a sense of compassion for ourselves and for our fellow humans, for what all of us have experienced and what we are experiencing in these times where things are so difficult for so many. At the same time, I've been talking about here how just compassion, or what a friend of mine recently called toxic empathy, can go awry, because in our human nature, we grasp onto anything when we're in a hard time, we will take any lifeline we can, any excuse we can, any way out that we can to avoid our own part in what has happened to us and what is happening to us. And so, along with this deep and growing and tender compassion, I'm suggesting that we also need to bring, or I'm suggesting that we do bring, a level of personal accountability. For me, for instance, I still meet people in my community who were harmed by what I did. I bump into them at the store or the post office or the co-op, and I do my best whenever I notice someone not to turn away, not to say, oh, damn, I don't want to have to face this today, but to walk up to the person and say, hello, I don't even know if you remember me, but I'm Mac, and I just wanted to apologize to you for what I did and how I know it affected your life and how I don't even know how it's affected your life. So to show up, to take accountability for myself, to take responsibility for what I did, not to beat myself up with it, although I've done a fair amount of that, but to simply show up in a way that holds myself to account for what I did. I pay restitution every month. From every dollar I earn, 10% of that goes towards restitution of the people who are harmed by what I did. I make those payments every month. That's one example of holding myself accountable. Holding other people accountable, I've worked, as I've said here and talked about in other videos here, I've worked in human services jobs for several years now, and I do my best to always lead with the compassion that I'm talking about, with a deep caring about and understanding of the circumstances that people have gone through that have led them into the predicaments that all of us to one degree or another get into. I recently started, a year or so, started work with a client who had gotten himself in a very difficult situation. He was a lovely young man, but I heard from a friend of mine that he had gotten himself in a very difficult position, and it was a real turning point, watershed point in his life. Excuse me. And she asked if we would be willing to take him into our program. So even though our program was technically full, we did. And we made the arrangements, and I set up a meeting with him. And at our first meeting, he showed up half an hour late. And I said, almost immediately, I said, look, I'm glad to see you. I'm glad to meet you. And I need to start by addressing this straight away. We have gone out of our way to make the space for you in this program. And we really want to help. And we want to be there for you. And we think you're a really unique and special person, and we want to help. And I'm going to need you to show up on time. Every single time we set up a meeting, I can promise you I will be there on time. And if I'm not able to, if my car breaks down or something happens or a snowstorm hits, I will reach out to you and I will let you know. That needs to be a basic part of our respecting our working relationship going forward. And to his credit, he said, I'm really sorry. I understand completely. And he was never late for another meeting. And so by holding him accountable, I was respecting myself. I was respecting our organization and the effort that we were making to be helpful to him. I was respecting him. I was saying, you can step up here and conduct yourself with integrity, and that will make everything go better. And so I'm suggesting that we bring this approach to everything we do. Each of us, what would happen in our collapsing culture? What would the impact be if every one of us began to meet ourselves and each other with compassion, and to hold ourselves and each other accountable for our actions? What if we meet the homeless crisis with tremendous compassion? I'm so sorry that you have to spend the night in the cold. I'm so sorry that the way the world works, it's really, really hard for a lot of us to even get by in the most basic ways. I'm so sorry that this is true for you and for so many of us. What if we start from there and say, at the same time, there is no magical parent, there is no government, there is nobody who's going to step in and care for you in the ways that you may really need to be cared for. That each of us, as difficult as our circumstances may have been, each of us needs to walk the walk of our own life. And each of us gets to walk the walk of our own life. Each of us gets to experience the wisdom and the satisfaction of overcoming even the greatest challenges that have been put before us. And it just seems to me that if we were to do that in every situation, if this were a universally applied principle that, we can't force anybody to do this, but if we invite everyone from the wealthiest of the wealthy to the people sleeping on the street to say, how can you be compassionate with yourself, and how can you hold yourself accountable for what happens next? And being compassionate for yourself may be being in therapy for many years, or it may be that you need to get help for a wide range of physical and emotional and psychological problems that you face. That may be compassion. It's not to blame or punish or point the finger at any of us for our weaknesses or for our hard places. It's to find compassion for them, and then to have that, because really accountability is another expression of compassion. I care about you, and I care about you enough to say that I don't think you need to get caught in this cycle of homelessness and addiction. I think that there are steps that can be taken with support, with compassion, and with accountability that can make your life better and make our communities happier and more loving and more compassionate places to live. So I'll talk more about this, but there's so much chaos now in how we're responding and reacting to the collapse of our culture all around us. We're pointing fingers. It's immigrants' fault. It's white people's fault. It's black people's fault. It's always somebody else's damn fault. It's the government's fault. It's my caregiver's fault. It's my parents' fault. And all of those things, again, are places that need our compassion, because there are hard things that happen to us from our parents, from white people, from people who are violent to us, people who disrespect, people who oppress. There's compassion that is needed. And there's also an opportunity for each of us to say, I'm not talking about accountability as a pointing finger, as a punishment, as a saying you're bad and you haven't made better of your life and you need to fix it. I'm saying accountability is a deeper expression of compassion. It is the understanding that in this human realm, suffering is part of the deal. And overcoming that suffering, and not just getting trapped in endless loops of victimization, it's somebody else's fault, blah, blah, but overcoming that suffering, working our way through it, finding our own truth, even in the midst of the worst suffering, is where some of the most beautiful things in life can happen. And what if, starting right now, instead of victimization, instead of blame, instead of looking for someone else to solve our problems, instead of blaming someone else for our problems, instead of resorting to addiction to avoid our problems, whatever it is. What if we all simply sit face to face with life, with ourselves first, with each other, meet ourselves with compassion, with a deep understanding and caring about everything that has happened to us and everything that is happening to us. And then take that the next step to say, instead of supporting each other in our victimization and our sense of helplessness, how can we as fellow humans care about each other enough to move ourselves and each other through and beyond these hard places, to surprising new expressions of what it can mean to be alive, even when the world seems like it's falling down around us. Thank you so much for listening.